Nobody supports reserved seats for ethnic minorities. Okay.
I think it'd be too complicated.
All right. I mean, one other thing I should probably put to you is the backlash, to some extent, that there's been against immigration in this election. It was an issue raised, of course, on the doorstep. Gordon Brown didn't seem to like it, but there is concern about immigration. Does any of you think it is legitimate to express the view that there is too much immigration in this country, and actually that in some ways members of the ethnic minorities are too privileged? MEHDI HASAN.
I think it's legitimate to express the view that there's too much immigration in this country. It's a view I don't share, and it's a view that's manipulated and exploited by the far right and by some of our tabloid newspapers. I think this election finally puts to bed the rubbish that you hear, that we can't talk about immigration. That's the kind of rubbish that you hear. When we've had it in every single TV debate, immigration has dominated in some shape or form.
I'm going to go to a phone call. This one's from Naz in London. Naz, your call. You're on the air.
Hello.
Naz, hi. What's your call to our panel?
Yeah. Well, after a few years of Labour behaviour, I've actually promised myself that I'm never going to vote again for whoever, actually, whether it's Labour or Conservative or Liberal. But after seeing gentleman Jeremy Corbyn on television, I must say, because the only reason I'm going to vote this time is just because of him. Because I live in Islington, Highbury.
Okay, Naz.
And the man been given like every minute of his spare time looking after people.
All right, well that's very kind, but I need a question from you, Naz. What's your question?
My question is as I said, the only reason I'm going to vote this time is because the gentleman Jeremy Corbyn, he actually looks after the people very well, and the gentleman standing in the middle was actually saying that he's in a safe seat, but I would say the only reason we choose him every time because he gives his time to the people. And
okay, Naz, thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much. That, John Rees, well, MEHDI HASAN, I'll put that to you. That does seem, let me try and shape that into a question, that does seem to validate Jeremy's point about constituency MPs and the difference they can make.
Of course it does, but then you can also play it on the other hand and look at the expenses scandal. There was a study done of the expenses abusers. The greatest abusers of expenses happen to be MPs who were in safer seats with the biggest majorities. Why? Because they have less to worry about. They have less to be concerned about. This is my point about safe seats. No parliamentarian should go into election thinking, I'm all right, I'll go help my neighbour because they're in a marginal seat. I'm safe.
All right, let's go to our next video question from the streets of London.
What is the point of voting if, even though local issues can be debated, reformed and so forth, global foreign policy remains the same and affects people of the world in a way that is negative?
Jeremy Corbyn, you might be against the war in Afghanistan, but the fact is you're standing for a party which took us into Afghanistan, which took us into Iraq, and which proposes to keep us in Afghanistan. What do you tell people who raise that on the doorstep?
I tell people on all my election literature, absolutely openly and clearly, I voted against the war in Iraq, against the war in Afghanistan, and opposed to try and replace it.
A vote for you, a vote for Labour is a vote for the war in Afghanistan.
No, it's not.
That's the policy your party supports.
It's a vote for a candidate who in the next Parliament, if elected, will not support, will not continue to support in any way the war in Afghanistan, will vote for the withdrawal of those troops. It is very clear, and my local party accepts that position. Local electorate, they can make up their minds.
MEHDI HASAN, there is a bit of a difference, but not very much.
Not very much. I mean, I sympathise with your viewer. You look at Afghanistan, John mentioned it earlier, all three parties, you've watched the second debate was a foreign affairs debate, and yet they all kind of argued about kind of equipment and armour rather than what are we doing there, are we winning, how long are we going to be there for? So on Afghanistan there hasn't been the debate we should have had. But having said that, and I think foreign policy is the one issue where people get very, very disillusioned quickly about what's my vote going to do. But then on the other hand, there are issues where there are differences between the parties. If you're a Eurosceptic and you want to pull out of the European Union, you can vote UKIP, you can vote Tory, because Tories are almost at that point. If you say, I don't want any military action against Iran, well, the Lib Dems have put that in their manifesto, saying we're not going to take any military action against Iran. So there are some issues where you can differentiate between the parties depending on your particular view.
John Rees, why is there so little difference between the parties? I mean, surely it would be quite popular. Wouldn't it be quite popular to call for a withdrawal from Afghanistan?
Yes, it would. But this speaks.
Is it just a reflection of their responsibility? You might not be able to do that with.
Well, it speaks to the fact that the political structure, and this is one of the fundamental questions about whether this country is a democracy or not. The political structure is inured to influences on it and to pressure on it, even majority public opinion, where it doesn't agree with the rich and the powerful. in this country, and in this case where it doesn't agree with American foreign policy. So there are certain things which it doesn't really matter to the political class whether or not a majority of people agree with it. They won't express that view because the power structure won't allow them to do so.
Okay, all right. There's several other issues which haven't, of course, come up in the election. Above all, what the parties are going to do about the deficit, where they're going to cut. Nobody's really being honest on that. So maybe in some ways we're not all that democratic. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there with you. That's all we have time for today. I very much hope you've enjoyed this special series, the last in this particular series, but we will be coming back to this after the election. And until then, from London and from me and for all our guests, it's goodbye.